for the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, the INEE, and I'm based in Geneva. I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar on ICT for Education in Emergencies, which is co-hosted by the INEE, GIZ, and UNHCR in collaboration with our partners. I will give a very short introduction, and then we'll hear from our four presenters, Laura Stankovitz, Dr. Negin Daya, Dr. Mary Mendenhall, and Peter Meiding Angong. Just a reminder before we start to mute your microphones if you're not speaking to reduce the background noise, and also to turn off your videos if it's been automatically switched on. If you're having any technical difficulties with the audio, please write to INEE on WebEx, the host, and not to me directly. The host will be able to give you some technical support. Also a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so you can go back and view it afterwards. That we already have some questions which you've sent us ahead of time, so we'll be going through some of those. But you also have the opportunity to ask questions in the chat box. Just make sure that it's switched to send to everyone. It's automatically sent to the INEE WebEx host, but please switch it to send to everyone because we have some people helping us gather the questions. So just by way of introduction, conflict and crisis are among the biggest obstacles to ensuring equitable, inclusive, and quality education for all. By the end of 2014, the number of refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons worldwide was 59.5 million, reaching levels unprecedented in recent history. And that number is still growing. UNHCR estimates that the number of forcibly displaced people has now reached over 60 million people. And children under the age of 18 make up 51% of those displaced people. Thus, the need for solutions to providing scalable education programs for displaced children and young people has never been greater. The use of ICT has the potential to support, enhance, and enable education for the most marginalized who have been affected by war, natural disasters, and epidemics. However, there is a lack of evidence and best practice in this field. So the goal of today's webinar is to highlight the emerging research on ICT for education in emergencies and to hear from some practical examples from Kenya, and also to create a dialogue about the role of technology for education in conflict and crisis settings. So this emerging research has come through two recently published landscape reviews. The first landscape review, Education in Conflict and Crisis, How Can Technology Make a Difference? You'll see the slide up on your screen now. This was launched in March this year at the UNESCO Mobile Learning Week. It complements a series of products published as part of the Mobiles for Education Alliance, commissioned by GIZ on behalf of BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. The landscape review is a result of a collaborative effort with All Children Reading and partners, USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government, as well as Creative Associates International and the INEE. The aim of this landscape review, which was authored by Dr. Negin Daya, who will be our second presenter today, is to identify major trends, patterns, knowledge gaps, and lessons learned about the use of mobile technologies in crisis and conflict settings, and to synthesize key themes and considerations for practitioners and policymakers in this field. The second landscape review, entitled The Leveraging of Technology for Refugees and Internally Displaced Persons, looks at systems, frameworks, barriers, resources, and promising practices for using technology-enhanced education in refugee and IDP settings, and supports those who are looking for practical tips and solutions to this complex area. This research is meant to help policymakers, practitioners, and donors better understand the evidence related to using EdTech solutions to meet the complex demands of these populations. The review is broken into 3 self-paced online modules, which you can see in the picture there of the front page of the landscape review. And those are understanding the context for ICT for education in emergencies, mapping the challenges, and designing effective ICT for education programs with refugee populations. This second landscape review is a joint initiative of Creative Associates International, All Children Reading, a Grand Challenge for Development, and partners USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government, as well as GIZ and the Mobiles for Education Alliance. So we'll now hear from our 4 presenters, first from Laura Stankovitz, and then after that from Nagin Daya, and then from Mary Mendenhall and Peter Madding Angonga from the Practical Experience in Kenya. There will be a short question and answer after each presentation, and then a slightly longer question and answer at the end. As I mentioned earlier, many of you have sent questions ahead of time, which we've recorded. We've had over 50 questions, so we've had to group them together and select ones that cover similar themes. And I'll be kicking off the question and answer for each presentation with some of those questions. But as I said earlier, you're also welcome to ask questions live by typing them into the chat box. And again, please just make sure that you send the questions to everyone and not just to the INEE host. Again, just a final reminder before we start with the presentations to mute your audios so that we reduce the amount of background noise, and also to turn off your video if it's been automatically turned on whilst you logged on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Laura Stankovitz. Laura currently works with the International Commission on Financing Global Education Opportunity. She also serves as a research consultant and advisor to Creative Associates International. Her ongoing research focuses on the use of emerging technologies to provide access to learning and vocational training in refugee camps and conflict-affected settings. So I'm just going to turn off my video and pass on the presenters right to Laura.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Still getting set up here. Okay. Cool. So thanks so much for the introduction, Laura. This presentation that I'm going to give today is part of a module series that was developed by Creative Associates. And its purpose is to foster dialogue and action-based learning on policies and practices for leveraging ICT for education displaced persons. Now, the findings emerged from a literature review, assistance framework, an online survey, and over 60 interviews with organizations working in the field. And the full landscape modules are much longer, but the portion I'm going to present today is a basic overview, and it has 3 parts: scope and scale, challenges, and opportunities. So let's dive right in with scope and scale. See if I can do this. Yeah. So first, we're going to zoom out. And so as I've mentioned, nearly 60 million people are displaced worldwide, and over 50%, or nearly 30 million, are children. This graphic that you see here was taken from UNHCR's population database. And the circles show the relative size of displaced populations. So those pink circles represent refugee populations, and the light bluish-green circles represent IDPs. Now, for the refugees, the pink circle specifically, 61% are in what's called a protracted situation, or that is left with no durable solution for 5 or more years. And the average length of displacement is 17 years or longer, which, as we all know, is longer than a child's entire educational career. All right, so now let's zoom in to meet some of the faces of the refugee learners. So displaced children experience a wide range of contexts, all of which affects their access and quality of education. So we have 4 case studies here that I'll just kind of run through their backstory. So the first in the top left is Yassine. He fled Jordan with his fled Syria for Jordan with his family in 2014. Due to his very long journey and period of adjustment, he lost 2 years of schooling and is really frustrated to still be in 4th grade when he should be in 6th grade. And he's still adjusting to life in a refugee camp when he spent his first 10 years in a normal middle-class home in Syria. Now, directly below him is Amal. She's a Somali, but she was born in Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, and she's never actually been to Somalia. So for her, life in the camp and her education are kind of normal. And due to the semi-permanence of Dadaab, technology is increasingly prevalent for her. She really likes going to school, but her mother often keeps her home to protect her from marriage suitors. Now, similar to Amal, Miriam, who's on the top right there, was also born a refugee outside of her home country. Her grandfather and father fled from Afghanistan for Pakistan in the 1980s during the Soviet invasion. So she doesn't live in a camp. She lives in a mostly Afghan town in Peshawar province. And she's not enrolled in formal schooling because of the language barrier and the distance she'd have to travel. Now, our last case is Santino. He is the South Sudanese IDP. His father and his mother and his brothers were killed when he was very young, so he spent most of his life fending for himself and moving around. And he most recently settled in Jangalai State in a small apartment with 3 other orphan boys. So he's 17, but he's still a freshman in his freshman year of high school. So he's much older than his peers, but he's really determined to go to technical school and become an electrical engineer. So sorry for that quick overview, but this is just a small sampling of the millions of displaced people worldwide. So let's move into some of the more specific challenges for these displaced learners, keeping in mind these ones that we just met. So what motivates people to attend or not attend school in these circumstances? So the first, we're going to break it down into 3 main categories. And the first is priority decisions. Now, these are needs that, if they're not met, are going to compete with learners being in school, such as lacking access to basic resources, economic security, personal security or safety, or a stable psychological state. So now the absence of any of these factors, it increases pressure to earn additional income. It might incentivize child marriage or crime and insecurity, and all of these keep learners out of school. Now, gender also plays a huge role here, which limits specifically girls' access to education due to early marriage, safety concerns, and expectations to fulfill more traditional roles in the home. So the second set of factors are education policy decisions that are made by the host government or the local government, such as language of instruction, grade placement, the relevance of the curriculum, or how, if at all, learning is accredited. Now, these policies are influenced by political pressures from the host community, the amount of resources available, and the political all of whom have unique reactions to this. Now, the last set of decisions are program decisions that are made by NGOs and donors and individuals. So each of these programs must choose how to leverage the resources, whether it be materials for teaching and learning, funding for more teaching positions, etc. The resources for these programs are also subject to political pressure, funding constraints, and competing demands, as I'm sure many of you know. So as you can see, the ability to attend school is not simple. It's influenced by this range of factors and stakeholders throughout the system. It seems here that I might have lost my presenter role. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Coming back.
Okay,
Laura, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Sorry. Just want to remind people to keep their microphones on mute, and that will reduce the background noise. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so anyway, let's dive in now to some of the more specific challenges, of which there are many, but we're going to cover 5 specific ones here. So the first is the very large number of out-of-school children. Now, the chart that you're seeing right now shows the percentages of out-of-school Syrian children around the Middle East. Now, just to note that prior to the breakout of the Syrian conflict, the primary school enrollment rate in Syria was 99%, and the lower secondary school enrollment rate was about 82% with a high gender parity, that's near universal enrollment. But today, nearly 3 million Syrian children inside and out of the country are out of school. This is according to UNICEF estimates, which pretty much just demolishes the Syria's achievement before the war. Now, one of the solutions that's being tried with ICT is for implementing organizations to work with the appropriate authority, whether that be the host or home Ministry of Education, to condense the curriculum into an accelerated learning program. And e-readers and other devices offer a huge opportunity in this area. A second major challenge is the language of instruction. which presents a huge barrier specifically for refugees who are living outside of their home country. And this slide illustrates one of the many scenarios that we face. So the Afghan Ministry of Education allows refugees that are living in Pakistan to set up parallel accredited primary and secondary systems, which are taught in Pashto and Dari, which is great. But this works well until students attempt to transfer into the national Pakistani system or to attend university when they have to switch their language of instruction into Urdu or English. So as a result, nearly 80% of Afghan children living in Pakistan are out of school. And this is according to UNHCR tracks. Now, a third challenge is that there's a lack of relevant or practical skills taught in the classroom, which is really frustrating to some learners. Now, this has a social and moral implication because joblessness can lead to disillusionment, be breeding grounds for extremism, and a lot of waste of human capital and potential. But it also has an economic implication, which you can see on the slide. So this is sort of like the negative cycle that occurs when a large portion of the population can't participate in the workforce, according to our systems framework that we did. Now, to address this challenge, ICTs can be used for vocational training programs, hard and soft skills, but also to communicate job opportunities among refugees and IDPs. A fourth major challenge is the nature of the refugee classroom environment, which we'll hear more about later. But many schools are overcrowded, which leads to a competition for resources, space, and teacher attention. Additionally, many students face post-traumatic stress, which decreases their ability to pay attention and obey order in the classroom. And so with these unique problems in mind, ICT program designers can work with local authorities to strengthen and adapt teacher and facilitator training. So, all teachers, refugees or not, should receive basic instruction in basic pedagogy and concepts. But from there can be additional instruction about how to manage large classrooms, provide psychological support, or conflict-sensitive education can also be offered. And the pictures here just represent a classroom in Uganda, and the above picture of that is a drawing that was done by a student living in Guatemala. So a fifth and final challenge is the lack of in-person support, in-person support and training that might be required for a program to be successful. So just listed on this slide are some forms of ICT initiatives in the dark blue and the support mechanisms that can accompany them to really maximize their value. For example, tablets, e-readers, and other devices should be accompanied by usage and maintenance training so that they're able to troubleshoot locally. So these are just five of the many challenges that exist in camps in other IDP situations. But let's move now into talking about opportunities. Time is short. All right, so we all remember this chart that I went over just a few minutes ago. So ICT and blended learning can mitigate a lot of the issues that are preventing students from accessing education. So let's just take these in turn. So first, ICTs can help refugees meet their and IDP learners meet their basic needs while still getting an education. So, online programs can allow learners to keep a more flexible schedule if they have to work or familial duties. Personal learning devices eliminate the need to commute long and dangerous distances to school. And then ICT is able to connect learners with psychosocial services beyond the camp so they can receive treatment and support. Secondly, ICT can fill some of those gaps that learners face when attempting to adjust to a new education system, such as apps for learning new languages for teachers and students, accelerated mobile learning programs, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, and online accredited learning to meet demands for new skills. And finally, ICTs can fulfill some of the traditional program and classroom needs, such as teaching and learning materials, to connecting to high-quality instructors and mentors anywhere in the world, which we'll hear a little bit later from our mentoring program in Kakuma, and the ability for learners to customize content and pace to suit their individual needs. So all of these can have an impact about whether or not students are in schools and learning, whether either in person or virtually. So to put all of this into context, I just want to run through quickly, I'll slow down a little bit, but through 3 examples that can help us contextualize some of these things we've learned. So the first is War Child Holland's e-learning Sudan. So in Sudan, millions of students can't go to school because they live in remote areas, in nomadic tribes, or in situations on the streets, or in situations of displacement. So e-learning Sudan offers a tablet-based, fully accredited accelerated learning program for out-of-school primary students in grades 1 through 8. So the program itself was co-designed, so not just designed, but co-designed with the Sudanese Ministry of Education, IFAD University for Women in Sudan, game developers, and local partners. Here you can see some scenes from the program, which was entirely tailored to Sudanese landscapes and lifestyles. And the tablets themselves are housed in centers with trained facilitators who support learning, and they oversee the central server access, the solar charging, and maintenance and support. So this to me is a model in sort of having clarity and purpose in the context and context for the usage of ICT. And in fact, its pilot program, which was launched in 2012, was very rigorously tested as to whether or not students could learn using this game-based instructional methodology, and had very positive results. So, and ongoing student performance data continue to show high levels of learning. So, very, very impressive program, and it incorporates a lot of the concepts and addresses a lot of the challenges that we discussed. A second example is Open EMIS Refugee, which was coordinated by UNESCO, and technical support was provided by Community Systems Foundation. So this was developed to fulfill a greater need for educational planning and management, some more structural issues. It's an open source application, and it facilitates the collection of school, student, and staff data on a regular basis using either mobile phones or computers. The data is completely customizable and to the context, and can capture a wide variety of information about students and their families. And the system itself outputs reports and includes data visualization capabilities and tools that help teachers analyze the information they're collected and adapt it to their classrooms accordingly. So a lot of that in-person support we were talking about. And to me, this is a great example of a system strengthening initiative that helps facilitators track students and their progress, and then make adjustments accordingly. And a third and final example I'll go through today is JCHEM, which stands for Jesuit Commons, Higher Education at the Margins. And this is a very collaborative global partnership that provides tertiary education for refugees and other learners who are more hard to reach. So the JCHEM blends on-site and online courses for an accredited diploma of liberal studies. So Regis University in Colorado in the US is the accrediting body. The learning management system and platform is housed out of Georgetown University, and all of the courses are offered online for free by fellow Jesuit universities. So the professors themselves volunteer their time to teach online, and that's accompanied by on-site tutors and mentors who provide in-person support for the learners. And the learners access these courses at computer centers, at JRS sites, and some other sites, and they're solar-powered and outfitted with internet. And this program developed to fill the void of accredited learning in the post-secondary space, which was huge. And it now offers an on-site, it also offers on-site vocational training in business and teaching and psychosocial support and other fields. So I think to date, they've, since their launch in 2010, they have graduated more than 1,900 students from around the world. And the learners are from all different contexts, kind of in countries attending the same courses. So sorry to run through that kind of quickly, but I just wanted to make sure I got kind of all of that across. So to learn more and to access our modules, this is the website. And thanks so much for listening. And so before we move into Nagin, who's going to kind of pick up on some of the major trends and recommendations, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Laura, for that presentation. And for those of you who've joined in the meantime, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. We are taking live questions through the chat box. So if you would like to ask a question to Laura, please enter it in the chat box and make sure you're sending the question to everyone, since we have a few people helping to gather the questions. Some of you have also sent questions ahead of time. We received over 50 questions, so we've clustered them to sort of cover a range of topics. So if you're dying to get your question answered and we haven't asked that one by the end, please feel free also to ask it again through the chat box. Also, just a reminder to keep your microphones on mute and to turn off your videos in case it's been automatically turned on as you logged in. So to kick off the questions, oh, and just to say, we'll have time for questions after each presenter speaks, and a bit more time for general questions at the end. So if you have specific questions for Laura right now, please type them in the chat box. I'd like to start with a question for you, Laura, about how to use technology to reach out-of-school children or young people who don't have access to formal schooling. That was a challenge that you highlighted in your presentation, that many of the people we're trying to reach are not in formal schooling. So perhaps you could go into a bit more detail about some of those experiences or good practices that you've seen in terms of remote learning with technology.
Yeah, I think for this, I want to maybe fall back on the example of that I gave throughout the course of the presentation. And again, apologies for speaking so quickly. But so War Child Helen's e-learning Sudan program, I think, has a lot of really good examples for how to reach out-of-school children. One of the things that I find most impressive about this program is that it was co-designed with the local Ministry of Education and local universities as well as local partners. So it's really a collaborative initiative. And what they've done is they've mapped the school curriculum, the accredited school curriculum, into an instructional game design. And so as students progress through the program, they're able to earn credits from the local Ministry of Education that then allows them to transition back into formal schooling or to transition on to, to lower secondary school. And so I think one of the really powerful things about this is the power of partnerships and how it's been able to make a real meaningful impact on out-of-school learners. Now, the tablets themselves are housed around the country, and they're very rugged. They can they're solar powered, and there's a facilitator that oversees their maintenance and guides students as they learn. And I think this is also really important because having an in-person support, for accountability, for usage of the tablet, and for also to kind of troubleshoot some of the problems that students are facing with their learning, as well as to take care of the tablets if they break, and to upload some of the data into the central server. And I see too, just kind of to pick up on another question, there was a question about monitoring and evaluation. So this program also in particular has been collecting data on its students from day one, and they work with research institutions, and they have a very rigorous methodology, and they are able to tweak their software after each round based on what they learn about their students. And so kind of having the tablets stored in that way they're able to capture the data from around the country and then make tweaks that, at a higher level and then kind of push it back out. So I think some of the biggest things, just to summarize, some of the biggest things are, one, the in-person facilitation and support, two, the partnerships, and three, thinking about, those alternative pathways that students can use to either re-enter formal schooling or to go on to higher schooling.
Great, thank you, Laura. We have a question from Mary Tangelder, which is just a clarification question. You mentioned that the War Child Initiative has been accredited, and Mary was wondering by whom.
So it's accredited by the Sudanese Ministry of Education. So the partnership was over 10 years in the making, and in the mapping of the game on the tablet, it was actually credits can be offered by the local Sudanese Ministry of Education, which students can then learn to transition into formal schooling.
Great, thank you. And that sort of leads to another question from Mike Tettelman, asking about the sustainability of strategies for these programs. For example, have local institutions or host country governments taken on these programs after the donor or implementing partner support has ended? So what is the status of that program with the Ministry of Education in Sudan, and are there plans for them to continue the ownership of that once the donors or partners perhaps move on?
Yes, they actually have, I believe it is, it's written into their education budget. So it's actually part of the government's plan to reach some of those out-of-school learners. So there is money, I believe, coming in from international institutions, but also local universities are donating some of their staff to stay on and analyze data, and also it's written into the Sudanese Ministry of Education's plan to receive funding that way. So it's very well embedded in the system. And in terms of sustainability for the others, Open EIMS Refugee, and these, I should also say, are among many of the organizations that we've looked into, but just to reference another one of the examples that I mentioned, Open EIMS Refugee is an open source program, so it can be taken and adapted by anyone in any context for free. And so when it is used, it is taken up by Ministry of Education with support from some of the staff there, but it's completely adapted and tailored for free on software to any context. And it can collect any data, not just about student attendance and grades, but also about whether or not students received meal vouchers or how much a family might earn. So it's really kind of an all-encompassing program that can capture a lot of data, and on the back end has visualization tools that can be used to analyze and act on it.
Thanks, Laura. Another question from Mona Yunus was asking about the monitoring and evaluation of these 3 case studies that you've presented.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the e-learning Sudan is very closely monitored, and it has been, and I believe that they've worked with the beginning with research institutions to make it to make it very to really deeply dive into whether or not students are learning, because the instruction uses a game-based methodology. So there was the question of whether or not students could even learn using this methodology, and so they rigorously tested it from the beginning, had to make some tweaks in the beta, and then are continuing to tweak and continuing to collect data. And from this, they collect data about how students are interfacing with the app, how quickly they're progressing, how often they're accessing the learning in the learning centers. And so all of that they've used to make the program a little better. One small anecdote that they told is in the initial in one of the initial versions they had a strawberry, which is a fruit that was part of the assets in the game, and a lot of the students just didn't know what it was, and so they quickly based on, because a lot of students kept getting the strawberry wrong, they had to switch it out into another fruit that was understandable by the students. So it's kind of on that molecular level, they've been able to make tweaks, but also on a larger countrywide level, they've been able to show that their methodology actually has yielded positive results. And they're also looking to, hoping to expand to more places.
Fantastic, thank you. Given the time, I think we'll move on to the next presentation, but just for everyone's information, Laura's email is up there on the screen, so she is willing to answer your questions directly if you'd like to email her after this webinar, and also we'll have a bit more time at the very end after all the presenters have spoken for some more questions. So thank you very much, Laura. And we'll move now to our next presenter, Dr. Negin Daya. Negin is an assistant professor at the University of Washington Information School in the United States. Her research is focused on gender and racial equity and technology, ranging from the use of ICTs in refugee education to the role of digital and social media for informal learning in under-resourced schools in North America. She is a lead author on the recently published landscape review entitled Education and Crisis, How Can Technology Make a Difference? So I will pass the presenter's role to Negin, and Negin, you have the floor. Just a reminder, whilst we get Negin on the audio, that to keep your microphones on mute. We are hearing some background noise. So to reduce the background noise, please keep your microphones on mute. And for those of you who are just joining, please enter any questions you have for our presenters in the chat box, and make sure that you're sending those questions to everyone. Thank you. Over to you, Negin. Okay, we seem to be having some trouble with the audio with Negin's microphone. So just bear with us for a few seconds while we try and figure that out. Let's see if our support staff can help Nagin get her microphone working, but we can't hear you at the moment, Nagin. Okay, it seems like Nagin's microphone is not working for the moment. So what I suggest is that we move to the next presentation. In the meantime, we'll try and get Nagin's microphone working. So apologies about that. We did actually test it before we started and it did work. So I'm not sure what the issue is, but hopefully we'll get that resolved. So let's move now to the third presentation with Mary Mendenhall and Peter Mading-Agong. Mary Mendenhall is an assistant professor of practice in the International Comparative Education Program at Teachers College, Columbia University. Her research interests include the policies and practices of refugee education across camp, urban, and resettlement contexts, as well as teacher support and professional development in crisis settings. Peter Mading-Agong is a primary school teacher in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, and he is originally from South Sudan. Mary and Mading will present the specifics of the mentoring program within its larger teacher training context and discuss the project-specific successes and challenges. So I will pass the microphone to you, Mary, and hopefully yours is working.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing in Kakuma Refugee Camp. I'm also very pleased that my colleague Mading is able to join me for the presentation today. Sorry, and I've got a coughing fit right before I had to start speaking there. And so also a thank you to Mohamed Houre at UNHCR Kakuma for helping us connect and making it possible for Mading to participate. So thank you to you both. As Laura mentioned, Mading is a teacher in Kakuma, and he'll share some of his reflections on the mobile mentoring program in a few minutes. So let me move to the next slide here. Just quite quickly, we'll do a review of the initiative. I'll talk about the larger initiative that mobile mentoring is situated in. And then we can really kind of home in on the mobile mentoring, what we've tested in the last year, what we learned about it, and then, of course, benefit from Mading's insights about his experiences. Okay, so moving along here. You know, the previous presenter, Laura, and you'll hear again from Nagin hopefully shortly, about the larger context that we're all working in, and obviously lots of challenges, but many opportunities to improve the quality of education for refugees and others in displacement contexts. And I think we're all here because we very much are working toward that goal of improving the quality of education. Our project will provide a very specific example and a new example of a project that we're undertaking. So just moving along here, just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of the Kakuma context. You can see here that there are about 21 primary schools accommodating 58,000 and a few students. Pretty good gender parity. While the primary school enrollment rate is quite significant at 73%, you see obviously a much lower percent at the secondary school level. So something to keep in mind in terms of the educational pipeline in Kakuma. And where the vast majority of the teachers in Kakuma are refugee teachers, to date only about 31% are trained, and there's incredibly high turnover on a year-to-year basis. So that's just a quick snapshot. You can see Kakuma is up here on the border with South Sudan. Okay. And on the next slide, to improve refugee education, we have to start with teachers. You know, we can talk about improving quality education all day, but without better supporting the teachers that are working in crisis contexts, this will never happen. So I think there are a number of policy-related issues that we cannot lose sight of, like recruitment, compensation, certification of what's happening around teachers and teacher management. We can certainly do and continue to, you know, make improvements to the way we're supporting teachers. You know, I think we expect teachers to build literacy and numeracy skills, and then also prepare learners and adults who are going to go back to potentially war-torn countries and improve society. And yet we don't quite support the teachers to actually do that and to become effective teachers who are, you know, kind of well prepared to provide a quality education. And so I think obviously there are pockets of great examples of how this is working, but by and large, I think we could collectively do a better job. So certainly refugee teachers face significant challenges, but they're also incredibly resilient, resourceful, and dedicated to making a difference. I continue to be just impressed and inspired by people like Mading and his colleagues working in Kakuma and other settings to make a difference in their learners' lives. So quite quickly here, you can read a little bit about the partnership between Teachers College, Columbia University, and Finn Church Aid. We've been working together over the last year, essentially to test and experiment with an integrated professional development opportunity that would help to improve the quality of education in Kakuma and perhaps other settings. So while this initiative was developed and is being developed for Kakuma, we certainly hope that some of the learning and the different resources that we develop may be useful in other locations. I'd also be remiss not to mention that this work is part of a larger collective effort by the Teachers in Crisis Context Working Group, which consists of a number of UN agencies and NGOs that have been working together for the last 2 years to develop training materials both for teachers and for coaches that will be open source materials made available on the INEE website. And I'll share a bit more about that in a second. So this, I'll skip this slide quite quickly, but essentially just really trying to better support teachers through different types of sustained and integrated and extended professional development support. So what we're trying to do here when we talk about an integrated model is look at training, coaching, and mentoring and how they can come together to adequately support teachers, both through face-to-face, on-the-ground training and coaching support, and then also online through the mentoring initiative. So quickly here with the different layers, and then we'll focus a bit more on the mobile mentoring. The training initiative draws on these materials that the working group I mentioned a moment ago has been developing. It entails 2 training approaches, one that spreads out the training over a number of months to allow practice time in the classroom in between modules, and then a second approach which takes a more accelerated and kind of compressed schedule for the actual training. But both would be then followed by layers of coaching and layers of mobile mentoring. So trying to move the slide here, to the coaching element. We know that teachers need opportunities to practice and to reflect on what they're learning and how they might incorporate it into their teaching style, their pedagogical practice, their classroom management strategies. So peer coaches will be trained to facilitate teacher learning circles, to conduct classroom observations, and to support teachers both in between trainings and after training sessions. And that brings us to the last layer here, which is mentoring. So in an effort to continue to extend the amount of time that teachers receive support, and also to diversify the type of support they receive, teachers will be connected with trained teachers outside of Kakuma. They could be in Kenya, they could be in the greater East Africa region, or other parts of the world. At this point, we have run a prototype of the mobile mentoring exercise, and we're getting ready to expand it in the coming months. The first time around, teachers received text messages via SMS or WhatsApp, and it included a combination of tips, strategies, reminders that were directly connected to the training that they had previously participated in. And some of the content also included motivational messages about the importance of education and of being teachers and of the important role that they play in the lives of their students. So this was just a one-time, short prototype, but we learned a lot in that process, and we talked to the teachers in focus group discussions and debriefed the experience afterwards, and I'll share some of those takeaways in a moment. In the next phase, what we're going to do with the mobile mentoring is we're going to maintain what they call a secret Facebook group that will allow us to create a bit more of a community feel to the initiative. Among the teachers, the coaches, the trainers, and the mentors, while also making some of the content and related messages available for more teachers over a longer period of time. That was something we heard back from the focus groups, that the content and the meaning of the messages they got was really important, but then it kind of got lost in the constant stream of messages, and they'd like to be able to refer back more easily. And sometimes with changing phones or data plans or airtime issues, the previously pushed content was lost. So trying to bridge the gap between the light touch of the technology through the phones, but then also leveraging something like a Facebook group to capture some of that information. The Facebook group would also allow us to celebrate teachers' work and accomplishments in a more public yet private forum. We will test the Facebook Messenger app, but also rely on WhatsApp and other texting or direct SMS as needed to accommodate different types of phones that the teachers have access to. So at this point, I just wanted to share a few quick takeaways and then bring Mading into this conversation. So there are a number of takeaways, but here are some of the highlights. I've got just a couple of slides to share. I think what was exciting about this, and when we talk about the project to others, is that we're leveraging existing technology. It doesn't require a huge infusion of financial support. The teachers, of all the teachers, I think we had 27 who participated in the initial training. Only one of those teachers did not have a use. So that is appealing in terms of the financial commitment. We also had an incredibly high level of interest and enthusiasm.
Sorry, just to interrupt you quickly, Mary. There's a few people who have their microphones on, so if you could please turn the audio off on which device you're using, that would be helpful. Thank you. Please go ahead, Mary.
Thanks, Laura. Or maybe Peter can use his privileges to mute them. These are the blessings and the curses of technology. So again, we had, the teachers exhibited a lot of interest and enthusiasm in the mobile mentoring prototype. I think in this next phase, what will be interesting is to see, under what parameters that level of enthusiasm and excitement continues and for how long. And so trying to test out different strategies around scheduling and duration of support, essentially. I think what was most exciting about the prototype was the ability and interest among the teachers to connect not only with the experts outside of the camp, but also with themselves. And I think particularly within the WhatsApp group, where teachers were part of a group that were receiving some of the content and some of the motivational messages, when questions were asked, they would respond to each other. They weren't relying on us all the time to respond or to provide answers. They had amazing answers themselves. They know their context and the challenges way better than we do. And it was exciting to see this horizontal engagement across teachers. And we'd like to continue to kind of build on that. And then, of course, the linkage to resources and teachers outside of the camp was particularly appealing for the teachers, just to, really expand their horizons, to hear different perspectives, to make a connection in a very different way, to support their teaching practice and just to support them as teachers in general. So next, the opportunity to apply theory to practice. For better or worse, and I don't think we realized this in the moment, teachers were checking phones during the school day. And what proved to be successful about that is that some of the content or some of the strategies that were coming through in the messages were kind of simple, easy things to try immediately. And we heard from the teachers that they did just that. So they would kind of get a reminder about a classroom management strategy or a technique around positive discipline, and they were kind of testing it out in the moment and kind of reinforcing the training and seeing how it would fly, or how it would work and how the students would receive it in their classrooms. So that was an interesting and kind of unexpected part of the prototype. And I think on the other side of that, those of us who are thinking about the broader project and how to make improvements, it was incredibly helpful to be part of this mentoring exchange, to see what kinds of questions the teachers had and how we could actually, take that information through the feedback loops and then make improvements to the training for the next round or now the new coaching content. So this very, iterative, kind of multiple feedback loops for, making improvements to the overall initiative. So that was really exciting. And of course, just the day-to-day M&E monitoring and evaluation data that would come with that process. And then lastly here, certainly the first prototype, we did have a number of teachers who had more basic phones, so we did need to push content by SMS messages. I see that Julia is signed on to our webinar today, and she was a major player in managing all of that. And it was essentially her full-time job to manage the 27 teachers and through this prototype mentoring process, to manage the SMS group and to manage the WhatsApp group, to get them the right responses and the right information in a timely fashion. So, not to be underestimated the time it takes to do this type of initiative and to do it well. And then, of course, sustainability is always an issue. On the one hand, this seems to be relatively modest in terms of financial implications around providing maybe airtime support for the teachers and possibly smartphones, because we certainly saw the benefit of the teachers being able to interact with each other and not just be receivers, on the SMS or basic phones. But perhaps, leveraging public-private partnerships would be a way to offset those costs. And secondly, we have a unique partnership here with Teachers College, Columbia University, and Finn Church Aid. Neither of us are operating partners in Kakuma Refugee Camp. So we see this as very complementary to what the primary implementing organization is already doing there, but it certainly begs some questions about sustainability and how that particular organization might pick up and benefit from this work and take it on for themselves. And then I think lastly, this is the most important point that we continue to remind ourselves about, and I think what we learned from the focus group discussions with the teachers is that while there was a lot of excitement about mobile mentoring, it's not meant to be a standalone activity. And we see, very much this integrated model of face-to-face support on the ground and the online support that, external resources can also contribute to the teachers and the wonderful work that they're trying to do in Kakuma and other settings. And we have many more takeaways, but I better leave it there for now. I definitely want to bring Mading in to this conversation. As Laura mentioned, he's a primary school teacher in Kakuma. He's been working there for a number of years. He's benefited from some of the training that not only we provided, but other actors in the camp have provided. So Mading, we'll turn it over to you, and it'll be great to hear your perspective about the mobile mentoring experiment that we tried last year. Yeah?
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be with you again in these major discussions. I'd like to appreciate Mary for bringing me into these discussions, actually. As it has already been mentioned, my name is Peter Mading, a teacher in Kakuma refugee camp. Actually, the prototype that was done in 2015, a partnership between Columbia University Teachers College and Finn Church Aid. These organizations have been coming to Kakuma refugee camps in 2015, and 27 of us have actually benefited from these programs. And this program is actually technology in nature, in that the teachers in Kakuma refugee camps are facing major problems, particularly when it comes to sharing information, sharing resources, and other challenges among themselves. But since 2015, we have seen a lot of improvement because of the technology that we have applied into teaching. We have come to realize that the best way of sharing information in Kakuma refugee camp is through technology. When Mary and her groups came to Kakuma refugee camps, we didn't know a single thing about technology. But when they arrived, we were taken through trainings and how to share information in terms of mobile. And in the process, we have come to discover that the best way of sharing information is through that major technology. So what are the benefits of this technology that we are doing in 2015 up to date? Now, when this prototype was begun, there was a major challenge of connecting teachers to mobile phones, connecting teachers to each other. And we came to realize that there should be a system of sharing information from one teacher to another. So we use this technology like WhatsApp, Facebook, SMS. Like, for example, if you are in a school, you are able to pose a question to the teachers, and the teachers there who maybe come across such question in their mobile phones are able to give us instant feedbacks. So due to the challenges that we are facing and the question that we asked and nobody was there to answer them for us, we used to post them immediately on WhatsApps, on Facebook, and we get instant feedback. These instant feedbacks are not theoretical, they are practical in nature, and therefore it was easy for us to manage the school, manage the classrooms. It was easy for us to come up with the best strategy of teaching methods. It was also very easy for us to ensure that most of the major problems that we face every day in school are handled well. And we have seen a lot of improvements in the way we deliver our lessons. We have seen a lot of improvements in the way we share resources. We have also seen a lot of improvements in the way we deliver lesson to class, in the way we manage our classrooms, in the way we organize ourselves from day to day in our duties. And therefore, this major training that was done since 2015 has really helped us a lot. In broader nature, most of the teachers in Kakuma refugee camp have benefited from this. And we have come to realize that most of the teachers, even the ones that did not participate in these groups, actually have a lot of interest. They wanted to be members, they wanted to participate, they wanted to add more and expand this program to another level. And I told Mary that the best way is to bring the center to Kakuma refugee camp, that the best way is to make sure that all the teachers in the camp, not only 27 of us, but all teachers in the camp should be included. Because teachers are asking questions, how do we join? Whenever they come and they realize that this is the best system, they wanted to join. And therefore, in Kakuma refugee camp, we have benefited from these programs. And the only thing we are asking Mary and her team is to ensure that they continue with it. Because by the end of the day, the best thing that can ever happen is to make sure that a child in the classroom is smiling, because education is the only thing that can change their life. You know, they are new children, and therefore it is only education that can change their life. So we would like to encourage Mary and our groups to continue with these prototype programs so that we are able to improves our abilities in delivering lessons so that we are able to improve also in the way we interact with learners, and so that we are also able to share this technology with a broader public outside there. Like, if I have a question, for example, I should not only present it to teachers within Kakuma refugee camps, but also to other teachers outside there. We are able to share information. We are able to get resources from outside the camp, and this one will be used locally in benefiting the learners. Because by the end of the day, the end is with the learner. Our major work here is to make sure that we benefit the learners. And technology has really changed our life in Kakuma refugee camps. As teachers, in the way we present ourselves, in the way we do our duties, it has really changed our life. We are not like before, and we need more of this to happen in Kakuma refugee camp. So, as I said it before, Mary, I wanted you to continue with the good work that you have been doing, and we are expecting you back. By the time you arrive back, you will discover that most of the teachers will be seriously waiting for you, because this is the best form that we can ever use here in the camp. So over to you again, Mary. If there is any question maybe you would like to ask, and the other participants, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Mateen. It's great to have you on this call, and we are coming back. We'll be there on May 30th. We will probably have some questions for you in a minute, but let me just go ahead and wrap up the formal part of the presentation. As you can see here, for our next steps, we're going to roll out both the longer term and shorter term approaches for the teacher training. We're going to pilot test the newly developed coaching materials, which includes recruiting teachers like Mading to become leaders as peer coaches in the camp. And thirdly, obviously, to roll out the mobile mentoring part of this work and really recruit a larger mentor base to draw from to support these teachers in the coming months. And I think what's been interesting about this for us, and as we've talked about this project, is that people are very interested in the intricacies of it. And so we're also doing our best to document the learning process throughout this a bit of an experiment, and also to make the resources, whether they're training resources or coaching resources or mobile mentoring content, to make it available as open source materials. And we'll do that hopefully through the INEE website as we continue. And then just on the last slide here, you can find our names and our email addresses, and also the website for the training pack that I had mentioned a couple times during the presentation today. So I know we have a little bit more to get to, and Nagin still needs to present, but maybe there are a couple of questions we could respond to quickly.
Thank you very much, Mary and Mading. It's great to hear both of your perspectives on this initiative and to hear what a great impact it's having for teachers in Kakuma refugee camp. A few questions have been coming in. One sort of practical question, you mentioned the use of text messaging applications such as WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, and there's a question about whether, you know, all teachers have access to a smartphone or whether they have access to dumb phones, and how that crosses over in terms of the practicability of reaching everyone and having, you know, text WhatsApp groups and such like. So maybe you would be able to respond to that challenge.
Sure. Yeah, something that we continue to grapple with. You know, the first time we did the prototype, the idea was that we would leverage existing technology, that we wouldn't be, you know, buying phones for teachers in terms of the long-term sustainability of this initiative. And through the prototype, we then had different groups of teachers. Those with smartphones used WhatsApp, and those with more basic phones used SMS. And while I think they were effective in many ways, I don't think they were equally effective. You know, I was participating on the WhatsApp group, and as I mentioned before, you know, the ability for the teachers themselves to engage with each other, I think is really beneficial and critical. And so if there's a way for us to support that, that would be something for us to think about. We are going to use the Facebook page in this next phase. You know, we still have our doubts, to be perfectly honest, about how many teachers are using Facebook and if that's the best way to go. But I was a bit encouraged actually talking to Mading yesterday in preparation for the webinar, and he indicated to me that some of the teachers who had been in the other group, the SMS group, had actually been investing in smartphones so that they would be able to participate in the more kind of dynamic exchange of the mobile mentoring moving forward. So that's something for us to think about. Is that appropriate for us to expect teachers to do that? There are some questions there that merit consideration, but there seem to be options, at least, in terms of managing different levels of technology and different phones in the camp. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. We have another question about who are the coaches and who are the mentors, and how you built the capacity of the coaches, and how to improve their practices of coaching.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more to say about this in a few months because we're just rolling out the coaching aspect of this project. This is new. Last year what we did was pilot the training and contextualize the training in the camp with an amazing head teacher, a refugee head teacher, and a member from the local organization who, you know both of them know that context, again, better than we do. So contextualization is a very important part of what we're trying to do for the training, for the coaching, and for the mentoring. So we're in the middle of designing all the coaching materials and the curriculum and the training, and we're going to test that actually in June and July in Kakuma. And the mentors as well will have a training that they'll go through online. And there'll be a lot of things that really try to help them understand and see with their own eyes through videos and interviews, mini interviews or profiles with the teachers, what it is we're talking about. What is this context of Kakuma, and what are some of the challenges that the teachers are facing? So happy to talk about that more offline, but a lot of learning to come as we roll out and test the coaching part of this. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. A question for Mading. Could you tell us a bit more about the challenges you face in using the technology, if any?
Thank you. Actually, it has already been mentioned by Mary. Most of the teachers in Kakuma refugee camp lack smartphones that they can use. But when the program was started back in 2015, the teachers have actually come to realize that they have to support this program by trying to invest in smartphone technology. So one of the major challenges was the issue of smartphones, but I have come to realize that most of us in Kakuma refugee camp, we are trying our best. The little incentive that we receive at the end of the month, we are investing that in buying smartphones. The other challenges that we are facing when it comes to the use of mobile phones is power. Kakuma refugee camp is located in a very remote area, and it's not connected to electricity, or if there is electricity, it is mainly connected to the organization operating within the camp. So most of the time, teachers have to struggle in charging their phones so that they are able to get access to the internet, and at the same time, they are able to connect to other teachers. It's a second major problem that we are facing on that side of technology. And the other issue is airtime, because we have come to realize that the issue of airtime is a problem. A teacher most of the time can lack credit that he or she can use in order to connect with the other teachers. So it's another major problem. How we get the credit cards that we can use to connect with others is also another major problem.
Thanks, Mading. Yes, there's still a lot of practical issues to be sorted out in terms of supporting the technology, but also the funding for the teachers to have access to data. And that was the question that came in ahead of time on the challenges around funding ICT for education in emergencies. And I think we can perhaps address that with all of the presenters at the end. I'm conscious of the time, so I think we should move to the final presentation of Dr. Nigin Daya, hoping that her audio works this time. So I'll just introduce her again for the benefit of those of you who have joined since or joined recently. So Dr. Negin Daya is an assistant professor at the University of Washington Information School in the United States. Her research focuses on gender and racial equity and technology, ranging from the use of ICT in refugee education to the role of digital and social media for informal learning in under-resourced schools in North America. She is the lead author on the recently published landscape review entitled Education in Crisis, How Can Technology Make a Difference? So let's pass over the presenters ball to Negin and hope that we can hear you this time. We still can't hear you, unfortunately, Negin. I wonder if there's a way that you could call in using your phone and I can move the slides for you. Sorry, I'm just trying to manage the chat. Okay, so Negin is going to try and call in. In the meantime, perhaps I can just ask Mary a final question. Again, in terms of the implementation and whether you think that this example in Kenya is something that can be replicated in another context, and what would be the challenges around doing that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And Negin, when you connect, just cut me off and we can make a quick transition. I mean, I do think that it can be replicated. I mean, I'm careful to say replicated, but I think it can inspire, I think it can inform projects that we might use. I guess I can turn my video back on here. That we might
Hello.
use. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, Mary, to cut you off.
No worries. Let's go ahead and switch to that question later.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and thanks for your patience. I'll try to just move right through the final presentation here so that we have a little bit of time at the end for more questions and answers. And of course, Laura and Mary have done a great job of opening up the conversation, as well as Nadine and the experiences from Kakuma. I'm going to talk a little bit about conflict and crisis more broadly, and speaking about how mobile learning can be defined also in these contexts, presenting a few examples from the landscape review, Education in Conflict and Crisis, How Can Technology Make a Difference, just to broaden the scope of the different types of initiatives and considerations and factors that are underway. Laura, can you all still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, wonderful, thanks. And I see that you just moved the slide, so that's perfect. Education in emergencies, conflict, and protracted crisis include, of course, refugee education and education for internally displaced persons. It also includes contexts of crises such as from natural disaster and disease that impact social stability and have an impact on access to and quality of education as well. So conflicts and crisis have a widespread impact that also affects host communities where refugees seek asylum, an important discussion and important consideration throughout our conversations as well. The term mobility conveys a standpoint on learning as something that is fluid and flexible, something that is broadcast through radio waves, over mobile networks, and over the internet, even when infrastructure collapses and people's physical mobility is stifled. So mobility in and for learning is suggestive of the role of people also in education and across borders. And mobile devices can support communication between people. Technology can support the sharing of resources. And these opportunities can lead to the exchange of valuable information, to building of social capital, and to the construction of pathways to and through education. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the trends that sort of emerged throughout the research for the landscape review. Starting with a growing interest in using ICT for system strengthening initiatives, such as mapping student and teacher attendance and paying teacher salaries. And so Laura gave us an example of this with the EMIS example. And this is a really important way of thinking about mobile learning, about ICT for education, about the ways that we can use technology for something that is a little bit different from our typical conceptualizations of education, of teacher training, of student learning, and so forth. That said, programmatic areas of focus are mainly in post-conflict and protracted settings with a focus on teacher training and direct student learning initiatives. So that's where a lot of the work is happening. And there is a focus on blended learning across different educational levels. So even as Mary was mentioning, there's this understanding that we have to use technology in order to support and connect people and to build on human resources. In many cases, the initiatives underway are thinking about learner-centered pedagogies and community-based practices, all of which relate also to sustainability of programming. So what we see really is a turn to using technologies in ways to strengthen the capacity of people and networks, and open educational resources, as Mary was also saying, making the resources available to everyone and without charge, and the role of informal initiatives using digital video and social media are also evident in the landscape. So we really have a breadth of different types of initiatives underway. I'm going to just provide 3 examples fairly briefly to try to capture some additional possible ways of using ICTs for education. And if we could just go to the next slide, please, Laura. So one example is a program focused in Gaza, which was the Suktel initiative. Suktel is an organization that specializes in digital solutions for humanitarian aid and development, and worked with UNESCO to create a digital communication system for teachers and administrators in schools in Gaza. So the system was designed to communicate with parents and students about attacks on and around school. And the system involved mass SMS distribution of messages, alerting parents of danger near their child's school, and informing them of when that danger subsides and when children can return to school. So Suktel worked closely with the mobile network operator in the region to create a Safe Schools brand, a kind of trusted label for text messages to ensure parents in this network know that they can trust the information coming to them in this text message form. And I'll come back to talking about trusted networks at the end. If we could go to the next slide, please. Another really important form of ICT initiative that gets a little bit overlooked sometimes in the contemporary kind of landscape of modern technology is radio and interactive radio instruction. 8.5 million children and young people were impacted by the Ebola outbreak in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And in Sierra Leone, after school closures were implemented to stop the spread of Ebola, radio lessons were provided to engage upwards of 50% of young people in daily guided learning and activities. Radio being free is widely available. It allowed lessons to be distributed in this medium to rapidly reach a large number of people who couldn't sort of congregate physically at that time due to the spread of Ebola. Other examples, and one that has had some research conducted to evaluate it, is the Somali Interactive Radio Instruction Program, which I believe is a USAID initiative, which was finished just a few years ago but ran for 3 or 4 years. And targeted out-of-school students and those in alternative schools like Quranic schools and community schools in Somalia. And this program focused on producing books and other teaching materials to supplement radio broadcasts. And broadcasts included prompts that invited teachers and students to participate in activities like songs and questions and answers and activities to enhance their learning. So these interactive broadcasts were also recorded on digital media players to further expand their reach and use. And during this time, school enrollment increased, and pre- and post-tests from the program showed notable gains in math and literacy for children who were engaged in the interactive radio program. So that is one really, really important example. If we could go to the next slide, please, Laura. The last example I want to offer is mobile phone support for literacy and numeracy, and we're seeing a lot more initiatives of this kind. Xavier Project, which supports learning spaces for refugees in urban Kenya and Uganda, sponsors students through language learning and vocational training and has a number of existing programs underway working with refugee communities. And the INEE Education Partnership already had a mobile program sort of underway based on the Kenyan national curriculum, and it was being implemented with Kenyan students as well. So Xavier is adding INEE's subject-specific quizzes and mini lessons to their program design, which is accessible by mobile phone or computer for adoption with the refugee communities that they work with. Other uses of mobile phones include the kind of social support over SMS and instant messaging applications that Mary was also talking about, including the use of Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, as well as communication and information sharing about school and school support. So in my own work with Sarah Dryden Peterson, we've identified strong communication networks for refugees in Kenyan camps and in diaspora who support educational pathways by sharing information about scholarship programs, about the social and cultural expectations and norms of post-secondary education, and directly related to academic skills like essay writing. And we're continuing to also work in the Dadaab and Kakuma regions to explore and very related to Mary's work and the engagements with WhatsApp and peer chats that Mary and Mading were speaking about. Sarah Dryden Peterson and I are also sort of exploring the particulars of use of instant messaging in the existing communication networks there, and are of course clearly in conversation with Mary and her initiatives, so that we're all kind of learning from each other and collaborating on work done in these regions. I'll just make a few points as I try to close this up and leave just a few minutes for questions. If we could go to the next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. So one of the challenges that everyone's always asking about, of course, is evaluating the effectiveness of ICT initiatives in educational contexts, which is difficult under controlled and well-resourced conditions, and it's additionally difficult in these more volatile and complicated contexts. One of our recommendations, if we could just go to the next slide, please, Laura, is to recognize the limitations of what we know, recognize that there is information, documentation, research out there that we still have to compile in order to make informed decisions, and also the need to explore qualitative and participatory research methods to better understand the impact of ICT for education in contexts of conflict and crisis. One additional challenge, if we could just go to the next slide, relates to the way that conflict and crisis settings can also exacerbate inequity and exclusion, particularly for girls and women and young people with disabilities. And if we could just go to the next slide again, thank you. And what we want to really be thinking about here in the context of technology use is how to carefully attend to the unique circumstances that come with using technology, so issues of privacy, issues of security around data, ownership of digital data with ICT for education initiatives. We want to consider political implications of ICT usage and engage with local communities to really understand the needs and impacts of those ICT initiatives for their most marginalized communities, but also for the host communities and the needs of the host community, which are really, really important. I think I'll end on the next slide and skip the last slide. And the next slide just says, and I'll just very briefly mention this issue of accreditation and mechanisms for certification using digital technology. So this is something that we recognize that we need more of. And that we want to spend a little bit more time really carefully thinking about how to set up accreditation systems and certification systems that allow for people to have access to those proofs of education and those proofs of sort of credit and certification no matter where they go, because of the ongoing mobility and the instability of a lot of these contexts. And I think I'll just stop there. The last slide was meant to kind of also lead into Mary's work, which she's already talked about. So I think we can just skip to you know, a sort of closing here and leave a little bit of space open for question and answer.
Thank you, Negin, for that wonderful presentation and for being patient with the technological issues that we've been having getting you on the webinar. So again, just a reminder, you can ask questions in the chat box. We just have a few minutes remaining. One of the questions that came in ahead of this webinar was how to measure the benefits of using technology over traditional methods. And I wondered, Negin, in your research, whether you came across any evidence that had addressed that issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question and it's a really difficult question. And I think one of the really key things to remember is that we're actually not separating sort of the benefits of technology out from understanding the benefits of more traditional educational practices. And in fact, the most sort of successful programs, Laura talked about War Child Holland's program and the e-learning Sudan with the game on the tablet. You know, Mary and Mading are talking about this teacher training program. These have in common really good pedagogical practices, really good established sort of educational, you know, modes of sort of operation, of teaching, of building curriculum that are really just using technology as a way of mediating and sharing information. So in that regard, you know, when we think about sort of testing the technology, we're actually still faced with just the same complicated issues around sort of, you know, testing of the educational context, which is always complex, with the addition of this sort of technological element. So, you know, I think we want to really think about it in a more comprehensive kind of way.
Thanks, Negin. Absolutely important not to make distinctions when they're not helpful, but to think carefully about how we can use technology in the best way. As I mentioned earlier, there's been quite a few questions coming in about funding and sustainability. A comment that came in from Anthony Bloom at the Education Finance Commission was about, you know, this community, as a community that's interested in this topic, we need to find ample funding for undertaking more robust evaluations of these promising initiatives. And the Education Alliance is interested in finding partners to work with for attracting funding for such research. So that's a kind of recommendation from the Education Finance Commission Technology Panel, and I'm sure you can contact Anthony Bloom to discuss that further. Just as people start to log off, I just want to quickly mention the INEE Technology and Education in Crises task team. We are planning to hold more of these types of webinars and interactive learning sessions in the future. The INEE Tech Task Team is a group of nonprofit, academic, philanthropic, and private sector experts who are focused on the use of technology to enhance education in emergencies. And their objectives are to share knowledge and information, to build evidence for this area, evidence of good practice, and to also elevate the experience of people working on the ground, as we've done today. So if you'd like to find out more information about that, please go to that link that's on the screen right now, ineesite.org/task-teams/technology. Again, if your questions weren't answered, I'm just sharing again the presenter's contact information here on the screen. So the 4 presenters are willing to respond to your questions directly if you'd like to explore some of your questions further with them. So please do get in touch with them and do find out more from the Technology Task Team site for the INEE. And I'm sorry that we had less time for questions, but I think a lot of interesting content and hopefully interesting food for thought for many of you who are working in this field and who are also facing some of the challenges that were mentioned by the presenters. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you all for joining us, and thanks again to the 4 presenters for your wonderful presentations, and also to the partners who've been supporting this. And please keep in touch, and as I say, look out for more on the INEE website in terms of future webinars and interactive learning sessions of this type.
For hosting and moderating so beautifully.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
We hope to continue the conversation offline.
Yes. Okay, take care. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, Nikki.
Thanks, everyone.